Hello and good evening, I'm Melisa Idris.
And I'm Sharaad Kuttan.
Tonight on the show, we'll be taking a closer look at the effectiveness of the incentives under the Prihatin economic stimulus package. Joining us on the show tonight, we have Associate Professor Muhammad Yusof, Saari, Chief Economist at the Future Labour Market Research Centre under Assoc. So, good evening, Yusof. Let's take a look at the wage subsidy programme. Let's begin the show there. The wage subsidy programme first announced in March, subsidising wages for 3 months, and then it was extended for another 3 months under the Penjana package. Now, and once again, I believe in September, extended another 3 months. I want to know, now that we've had some time to look back and see the effectiveness of the wage subsidy program, what have we learned so far about its effectiveness?
Thank you, Melisa. Short word, in the summary, this wage subsidy program significantly significantly retain employment in the market. Statistically, up to 20th November, in total, there were about 3.4 million of employees or workers benefit from the program. This involved about more than 400,000 of employers. Just imagine, without this program, wage subsidy program, I mean, you just imagine just half of 3.4 million of workers without jobs, then they get unemployed. So suddenly, I mean, that simply the unemployment rate will raise up to maybe more than 7%. Now we are experiencing around 4.6%, which is manageable rate of unemployment rate for the situation. I mean, the COVID-19, and so it's helped a lot.
Right. So, Yusof, I understand, you just suggested that they've been effective and you give us some numbers. But many of the concerns that both politicians and I think economists have had is the informal sector, that, where people don't have bosses and they're not in formal employment. In terms of who these 3.4 million people are who've had their jobs as it was saved by these by this project, by the wage subsidy program, who's left out? I mean, you could just have a sense of who's left out.
Actually, informal workers, it's not really, I mean, to my point of view, that informal worker is actually, this is the situation or the workers that we know that they are running the economy, or they are working without any social assistance, without social protection, even pre-COVID, before COVID-19 hit the economy. So when COVID, luckily, I mean, that thanks God, COVID-19 hit Malaysian economy and hit the world, that this issue raised again, that requires specific attention from the policymakers. Yes, wage subsidy program only affected about 7 million workers, about million workers of private sectors, I mean, which dominate or constitute 30% or 1/3 of the private sectors. Another about 3 millions, I think about roughly 3 millions of so-called that own account workers, including the gig workers, also informal workers. These are workers without social protections. They don't have employment insurance system. They don't have EPF, some of them. So this is the issue that I think that I think a few weeks ago, or a few days ago, there was attention from the government to look at this, or to see how the government can assist this group of people, of about 3 million of workers, which consists of about roughly 19% of the workers in Malaysia. So moving forward, I do believe that government have at least I know from Perkeso perspective or SOCSO perspective that we are looking a strategy how we can bring aboard these workers to ensure that they have been protected at least by SOCSO or by insurance employment system.
Can I ask you, we've had a few months now of the wage subsidy program. To what extent does SOCSO know of the public's understanding and awareness of the, the extensions of the program, of the application process of the program? There are kind of strict conditions in terms of proving your profit, your decline in terms of your profit year on year and the like. Has that process been made easy for businesses and employees?
Yeah, you are absolutely right. Yeah, one of the reasons the wage subsidy program 2.0, the take up rate quite low, considerably lower compared to the previous one. One of the reason is we found that the procedures or the documentation might contribute to the lower rate of the for the subsidy with subsidy program. I think the government have improved that aspect, but I think to be equal, another reason that we should take into consideration, and then last month, I think, or last 2 months, I cannot remember exactly the dates, we have conducted a snap survey to ask people or to ask employers what happened, do they can survive when with subsidy program ending by this year or end of this year. Majority of the respondents say that they can survive, and then they have improved the situation, they have improved the businesses, and they can run the business without extension of wage subsidy program. In addition to that, there are small numbers of employers who still need specific extension or specific extension from the wage subsidy program. And then another reason that I would like to share with you guys here, uncertainties also explain why the low taking rate, because employers outside there, they are still waiting for what's happened for the next 6 months of the economy. So we are dealing about uncertainties. So for that reason, they don't want to commit at this moment. So until they see or they observe the conditions has been improved compared to the past 6 months.
Okay, and is this information being fed back to the government in terms of informing their decision as to whether to extend the wage subsidy program or not? If you compare to, say, Singapore, which announced at the offset that they were going to do 9 months, and then whereas Malaysia did 3 months extension phases, are you feeding back this information to the government so that they understand what is needed on the ground?
I mean that if we compare with the case of Singapore, our economy compared to Singapore is different. So they are just a small economy, an island economy, and then they are better than us. So they have, that's strictly they have more money than us. So that's the reason why we start with 3 months and then we extend another 3 months and then 3 months basis. I think the most important here is not the at least from my perspective, if we want to ensure the sustainability of the business, we want to the recovery take place in sustainable ways. I think the most important aspect that is we must to ensure that the economy is opening, so we must to keep reopening or opening the economy, although we are dealing with the health risk of this pandemic, so we cannot close the economy as what we did during the MCO. So we have seen, we closed the economy, almost closed all the sectors for almost 2 months. Then the burdens and then the negative effect from the closing the economic sectors is huge. Was huge. So
right.
we have.
Yusof, can we ask, if you could break it down in terms of sectors, and I'm thinking primarily of sectors affected by the closing of borders, right? So the tourism and tourism-related sectors, F&B, hotels, aviation. Has the program been particularly effective in that sector or other sectors? And there's a difference.
I think the government pays seriously to this issue. Yeah. In fact, under SOCSO or under the Ministry of Human Resource, we are looking for a specific assistance to the airline industries and also other industry too. I think the most important here is that if we learn from OECD countries, for example, how they designed the strategies or to reduce the burden or reduce the unemployment of the airline and the tourism industry, is that they try to maximize, try to find what are the potential skills that these workers have. So if they are good, let's say that in terms of cooking or, that just might not be a good example. If they are good in terms, because this morning we have discussed this issue with my colleagues. So unfortunately, I could not share with you because suddenly I forgot the points. But what I try to emphasize here is that if we have to attract, we have to find the potential talent of the employers, let's say airline industry, and then how to mobilize them to the new industry or to the new sector and to placement them to the right skill that they have.
All right. Well, Yusof, thank you so much for speaking with us tonight. We really appreciate your time and you sharing your insights about the labour market. Thank you. We're going to take a quick break here on Consider This, but we'll be back with more, so stay tuned. Thanks so much for staying with Sharaad and I on Consider This. Let's continue our conversation about the incentives under the Prihatin economic stimulus package. Joining us on the show now, we have Firas Raad. He is the World Bank Group's representative to Malaysia. Good evening, Firas. Now, I'd like to begin our conversation with a look at the Bantuan Prihatin Nasional cash transfers. Firas, how effective would you say the breadth and the depth of the Bantuan Prihatin Nasional has been in terms of a form of social assistance? Is this what the Malaysian public need at this point in time dealing with this crisis?
Well, thank you, Melisa and Sharaad, for inviting me back, and it's always great to be on your program. As you know, the Bantuan Prihatin Nasional program has been the main form of cash assistance for vulnerable households and individuals during the crisis. The first round of BPN was dispersed in April and May, and the first phase of the second round of BPN was dispersed in October, with the second phase scheduled to come in January. The coverage of BPN is broad, as it includes both the B40 and the M40, covering households earning 8,000 ringgits or less, and individuals earning 4,000 ringgits or less. Its coverage is clearly broader than Malaysia's flagship cash transfer program, the Bantuan Sara Hidup, which covers the B40. This broader coverage, particularly during the period of the first MCO between March and May, was particularly welcome, as the stringent mobility restrictions implemented then prevented workers from earning incomes, especially informal workers and those with jobs that cannot be performed from home. Many of these workers also do not have EPF accounts, as you know, which means that they were unable to benefit from the early withdrawals of 500 ringgits per month from the EPF's account 2 that was announced early in the crisis. Now, in terms of depth, you were asking, Melissa, the total support from the BPN ranges between 800 ringgits for M40 single individuals to around 2,600 ringgits for B40 households. The benefit level or the depth is significant, particularly for B40 households. The benefit level, some of which, has well, going back to the benefit level, without this, the B40 households would not be able really to go forward, as many of them have lost their sources of income. A study has also shown, that one that was conducted by UNICEF on PPR residents in Kuala Lumpur, that almost 60% of these households found that BPN to be the most useful form of assistance among the other measures introduced, including rental exemptions and social assistance from the Department of Social Welfare during the COVID crisis.
Firas, very simply, can this government afford this level of assistance, and for how long?
Well, I think at the moment it can. The question, Sharaad, is then what happens with the crisis going forward, and whether the high levels of transmission that we're seeing now continue on to the first quarter of 2021, or is it the second quarter? I think then the government will have to rethink what they are planning to do, and possibly to extend the cash transfer assistance. I think that would definitely be needed by the bottom 40.
Firas, how do you think governments should think about precisely this issue of funding this kind of assistance, and how us as a public concerned about whether the government can sustain it, and who ultimately will have to pay for this? And is it going to come out of our natural resources? Is it going to come from higher taxation? How should that mix be done in a way that is sustainable and also just?
Well, I think it's going to have to come from a combination of sources. I think naturally, the government will have to spend the money, and obviously will have to finance, the deficit. And as you know, Sharaad, when you're in a war, you have to do what it takes to win that war. And Malaysia, clearly is not there yet. So I think the overall approach should be one of spending what it takes, but also keeping in mind that there is a medium-term agenda and a fiscal sustainability agenda that needs to be preserved. Now, we did see that the government did announce certain medium-term fiscal measures. So there is a framework in place for revenue and thinking about revenues more in the medium term, and that's very important, because Malaysia does only collect around 17 to 18% of revenues as a percentage of GDP, and that's quite low for an upper middle income country. And in fact, for high income countries, it's over 30%. So as Malaysia goes forward beyond this crisis, it will have to think of how to expand its revenue base. But for now, I think the focus should be on trying to get out of the storm and to protect the vulnerable individuals and households that need help.
Right, so some of the incentives that were announced under the economic stimulus packages, also announced under Budget 2021, has been about allowing withdrawals from EPF Account 1. I'm wondering, Firas, allowing EPF Account 1 withdrawals, is that an effective measure to help distressed households?
Well, permitting early withdrawals from EPF Account 1 balances has both advantages and drawbacks. It does alleviate the financial burden of households and consequently props up domestic demand during a crisis. But it also affects, as you know, the income security of Malaysians during retirement and will not necessarily help the B40, many of whom do not have EPF accounts or have very low balances. It will, however, help some of the M40, particularly those who have lost their jobs or experienced a reduction in income. Now, on this point, our analysis from a recently launched report on population aging in Malaysia indicates that prior to the crisis, almost 75% of EPF members had account balances below 250,000 ringgits at age 54. Such a balance would translate into a monthly retirement benefit of less than 1,050 ringgits. So clearly, the allowance of early withdrawals will further reduce the adequacy of old age income benefits for EPF members in the future. So there's a trade-off between supporting in the immediate term and then trying to protect income security after retirement.
Well, I understand that the World Bank had also proposed perhaps slowly increasing the age of withdrawals for EPF. And I'm wondering, you know, this is not the first time that you've made that proposal. How popular has that been in terms of reception to that proposal? Is that something that will go down easily with the Malaysian public?
Yes, I think, you know, as you alluded to, Melissa, we did include this recommendation in our report in July, the Malaysia Economic Monitor, which focused on strengthening the social protection system in Malaysia. And our point back then was that COVID-19 exposed and revealed some of the underlying weaknesses of Malaysia's social assistance systems and also its social insurance system. And with regards to social insurance, you know, as I said earlier, I think the government has to try to strike a balance between assisting people and giving them the flexibility to draw on their retirement balances, but also trying to protect them because a large number of Malaysians, and this is a fact, they do not have enough income security upon retirement. So the government has to think of what it has to do now to protect these individuals in the future. And more recently, as I said, we launched a report on the country's population aging phenomena, and Malaysia is an aging country at the moment. It's more than 7% of its population is over 65 years and older, and this is going to increase with time. So within our estimation, 24 years, Malaysia will become an aged nation, and this will create more and more pressure to ensure that the elderly, senior citizens who want to live out their golden years have enough protection to do so.
Well, I'm looking forward to my golden years. Firas, but before we get to that moment in time, weaknesses also in the economy. What does the World Bank see in terms of, or is it too early to tell, what kind of structural weaknesses are in our economy as a result exposed by this pandemic?
Well, I think the big question, Sharaad, is, more medium term, how do you recover from COVID-19, and then how do you begin preparing the country for its eventual transition to a high-income and developed country. And we think, in our estimation, that transition may happen in the next 4 or 5 years, or possibly 8 years. But within this decade, Malaysia is going to do that. And we think it must focus on a number of things. It should start to reinvigorate the drivers of long-term economic growth, and those consist of investment, both public and private, increasing productivity growth, getting more women into the labor market, that's very important, and improving human capital outcomes. But then there are, agendas related to improving competitiveness, creating enough high-quality jobs, supporting inclusion, and this is a big agenda of the government to really promote shared prosperity, and then improving the quality of government services, so focusing on institutions. But another big agenda, and I alluded to this in the beginning, was making sure that Malaysia has enough revenues to actually finance this transition, and that's where all of these medium-term strategies to think about revenues is very important. So I would focus on those things.
Well, Firas, it's always a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much for being on the show. It's a delight. Thank you. That's all we have for you on this episode of Consider This. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Melisa Idris.
And I'm Sharaad Kuttan, signing off the evening.
Good night.